This is the Power Break Podcast number 065, an interview with Justin Woodall, church planter and pastor of City Church in downtown St. Petersburg, Florida. Hi, I'm your host, Bob Brubaker, inviting you to stay tuned as we seek to give you a little power in this break to help you succeed in the race of life. The Power Break Podcast is a twice-weekly show that provides a discussion of biblical principles applied to daily life and an interview show featuring stories of perseverance to help you keep pressing on. Let's go to the interview.
Here with Justin Woodall today, we're just talking about church planting. He's the man that's planting a church downtown St. Petersburg.
Yes, sir, downtown.
Tell me, why did you pick downtown St. Petersburg to plant a church?
Yeah, so one, I have a personal connection. I grew up in the Bay Area.
Okay.
And so when I was a teenager, I liked to hang out in downtown St. Petersburg. It wasn't a great place back then. Back then I hung out there because I played in some rowdy punk rock bands.
Oh my goodness, you?
Yep. And so that's where that was the only place that had divey enough places for us to go play. So I grew up going to downtown St. Pete. And then it started to go through a little bit of a renaissance that started in the arts community. Mm-hmm. And as we began to look around and consider church planting, we became drawn to a place like downtown St. Petersburg for, one, the way that the city was changing and evolving. But then as we began to research it, finding that St. Pete is one of the least religious cities in the country. And so it gets overlooked oftentimes because Tampa, St. Pete, Clearwater are all kind of lumped in together. But when you break out the demographics, St. Pete's one of the most underserved cities for churches, not just Presbyterian churches or Reformed churches, but for churches of any sort. Wow. And so that sort of hard soil was attractive to us. Okay. And so we sort of started to look around and found, a way, and God provided a call, and so we chose to go into downtown St. Petersburg with nobody coming with us.
Let's back up. You were in the Southwest Florida area, or the Presbyterian area here in the Tampa, St. Pete area.
Yep.
You served at Seminole Presbyterian Church.
Yep.
At the
now
time.
Christ Central. Yep.
Yeah, now their new name is Christ Central. But so did you have that in your mind when you were there?
No, I did not. So when I was serving Christ Central, used to be Seminole, I was in seminary, and all the rage at seminary was church planting. It was all the cool kids were going to go be church planters. And I've always kind of had a natural disposition to go the opposite direction of other people.
Where everybody else is going, I'll go the opposite, says Justin.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so I said, established churches need young pastors too.
Okay.
And so I thought that I would, I just didn't consider church planting something that I was going to do. Just sort of, nope, that's great. That's a wonderful opportunity and thing that people should be doing, but not me.
Okay, so your life, the Lord took you to South Carolina.
Yep, to Myrtle Beach.
Okay.
This is a pretty interesting thing. I've never lived more than 10 miles from the ocean in my entire life.
God knows you need it.
Yeah.
It's good air for you to breathe.
Yeah.
So you went to South Carolina. Now, when did the itch to plant a church in St. Petersburg start?
Yeah, well, the itch didn't come from St. Petersburg. The itch came from a hurricane of circumstances that I could not help but see God's hand in. Okay. It started at General Assembly. When my wife and it was the day where you go to seminars, and my wife went to some seminars and I went to some seminars. And then we got back to the room that night after doing our things, and we're sort of debriefing with one another. And I said, I had a strange thing happen today. And she smiles and looks at me and kind of laughs and says, me too.
Oh my.
And I said, well, you go first. She said, well, there were these ladies that said that they were going to have a seminar and it was going to have tea and scones, and particularly for young pastors' wives. And so my wife and her friend said, well, we're young pastors' wives and we like tea and scones. So let's go here. And she was absolutely struck by the way that these women talked about the gospel, the way that they shared their lives. And it comes to find out that these women in this seminar was put on by Parakaleo, which is a ministry to church planting wives. And at the end of the seminar, they said basically, made a joke to the effect of, if your husbands aren't church planting, they should consider church planting so you can be a part of Parakaleo.
Oh, boy.
And my wife laughed it off and told me this story. I said, well, the same funny thing happened to me, sort of. I was in a seminar, and to be honest, Bob, I didn't choose the seminar because it looked like the best. I looked at all the seminars, and none of them jumped out at me. So I made my decision in the most godly way I knew how, which is I looked at the pictures of the guys and looked for the guy that looked most interesting. And it turned out to be a really good, encouraging seminar. It's the only General Assembly seminar I remember to this day. I couldn't even tell you a seminar that I went to this year, probably.
Wow.
But I remember that seminar as excellent. And at the end of that seminar, Pastor Michael Langer, who works for Ministry to State now, said, you know what? A lot of times in these seminars, we dump information and then tell you to go about your day. But I'm ending early, and I want you to find the person closest to you, and I want you to pray for them about what we've talked about in this seminar. And so that seemed like a good idea, and I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I turned around, and there was a guy sitting behind me. And the first words out of this man's mouth were, Justin, when are you going to go plant a church? I looked at him and I said, no, that's not what I'm aiming towards. That's not what I feel called to. And he goes, well, I just want to tell you, I think there's something, you should be a church planter. And I kind of laughed at him and kind of in my mind said, that's not how Presbyterianism works, friend. But then got to know him. And his name was Terry Traylor, and we struck up a friendship. He was at New Life in Glenside, which was the church that was planted by Jack Miller, who was instrumental both in my growth in coming to know Jesus, but also in my coming into the Presbyterian church out of fundamentalism, the Christian Counselors Education Foundation, which in many ways grew out of the New Life churches and their connection to Westminster, was a part of it. So I thought that was strange that pastor at that church was saying these things to me. Mm-hmm. And so my wife and I began to ask the question, is this just bad soda? Is this just something funny we've had to eat today? Or is there something to this? And we went back to our church in South Carolina. We began to pray about it. And we began to ask the elders about it. And we asked the elders, we think that we had these strange experiences. What do you guys think? We've been praying about it and we don't know. And they said, we think it's something you should investigate. Let's have you ask the congregation if they'll fund you guys going to church planter assessment.
Oh.
And they opened up to the congregation on Wednesday night at dinner. Hey, Justin and Angie are praying and thinking about church planting. They want to see if they'd be any good at it. Want to see maybe if this is something Jesus has for them. But assessment cost a good bit of money. If you think that that's something that they should go forward with, you're welcome to donate. They sent out an email 12 hours later when the secretary got in the next morning and said, please stop sending money. They had paid for more than double what we needed in that one night. And so my wife and I sort of reluctantly went ahead. And every step of the way we were, I never thought this was never the plan. This is never what we wanted. This is not what we thought we should be doing. But we kept sort of stepping ahead, kept moving forward, and God kept opening the doors.
Wow.
And so that's how we got to assessment.
Okay, so you got to assessment. Now, take me from there. the steps that now you're in St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
How long a period was that?
That was about a year.
Okay.
It took some time. We interviewed at a number of places. We walked away from assessment refreshed. We were excited about the possibilities of church planting, but we were not affiliated with any sort of church planting network. We we were kind of a people without a home. A lot of people go to assessment and they're sent by a network that's supporting them and that's saying, hey, we want you to be our next church planter. Go get assessed so we know what we need to work on to put you on the field. We weren't that. We were free agents. And we spent a year investigating calls all over the country and even in Canada.
Really?
Yep. And so every time things sort of fell apart in some ways that just as amazing as the steps that took us to church planting, things would fall apart in strange ways. And so it came to the end of that year of us looking, and the church had said that we would be allowed to use the extra money that they had collected for our assessment to go to the Mission to North America training conference that they host every year in Orlando. And it was getting towards the end of the year. We'd been looking for a year, and the church and the session asked us to sort of put a deadline on searching. That way, we knew what moving forward with our church in South Carolina, Surfside, would be like, sure. And they knew, and which is a absolutely fair assessment. Sure. And so we said that seems right. So we said, here's what we'll do. We'll go to the training conference, and any sort of leads that grow from that, we'll chase. But once all those go cold, we'll say, okay, God taught us a lot about engaging non-Christians. God taught us a lot about a lot of things in this year, but it wasn't because he wanted us to go plant a church now. And it was at that conference I met a friend who I had known from the presbytery here, Tim Rice.
Okay.
And he brought up downtown St. Petersburg because he knew that we had a connection to it, and connected us to Westtown Presbyterian Church in Tampa, who agreed to be our mother church. And things started rolling. That happened in January. In February, I met with the elders at Westtown, and they provisionally approved a call for us. April came down for committee meeting for a transfer, and then in May was transferred into the Southwest Florida Presbytery as a church planter for downtown St. Petersburg.
Wow. Now, walk me through the steps. I've been so impressed. You don't have a core group in downtown St. Petersburg.
Yep. Nobody.
Okay. Here's Justin Woodall, fresh from South Carolina, comes in and says, I'm going to plant a church in downtown St. Pete.
Yep.
What are the first steps you do? I mean, it sounds intimidating.
It is. It sounds foolish, to be quite frank. We didn't know, so we moved to town, and we knew that it was going to be a longer term church plant because we did not have a core group. So we raised money for an extra year, and our first year that we were moving towards planting in St. Petersburg, I made it my job to study the city, to learn every single thing I could, to get to know every business owner. St. Pete's big on small business. And so to get to know them, to find out what the city is about, what makes the city tick, not just the stuff that's on visitstpeteclearwater.com, but the actual on-the-ground stuff. And in that year, God started to do some amazing things. I joined a gym that was just a couple blocks from my house. And my third day in the gym, I saw a car with a Covenant College bumper sticker on it. And I walked in and said, who drives the Murano? We need to talk. And this very athletic guy pops his head out from behind a big old weight rack and says, "It's mine. Why?" I said, "We need to talk about Covenant College." He goes, "How do you know about Covenant College?" "Well, I'm a Presbyterian pastor. I'm a PCA pastor." He said, "But there's no PCA churches around here. What are you talking about?" And he says, I said, "Exactly. That's what I'm here to work with. That's what I'm here to change." And became friends with him and his wife. He is now an elder candidate at our church.
Wow.
God just began to provide some unique opportunities in meeting people throughout the city. People that were new to town and were not connected to a church. People that hadn't been to church in a long time. And so I also, during that year that I was trying to study the city, became the chaplain of the St. Pete Police Department and got to know my city in a whole new way and got to serve the officers and non-sworn staff at the police department, and had a couple of guys who became a part of our church through that.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and so then they start inviting their friends, and then we start making connections in other ways through our kids' school, through my wife being involved with MOPS, and just trying to be a part of the city, and started growing something. So we started a prayer group on April 12th of 2016.
Okay.
2015, I'm sorry. Getting my dates
mixed up.
Let's
go back to 15.
Yep. So we started a prayer group in our house. Our first meeting had 7 people, including my wife, one of whom was homeless. And that was our first prayer meeting group.
Our
first gathering of City Church.
Yep. St. Pete.
And we just started praying for our city, praying for our friends that didn't know Jesus, praying for what God might do. And we met once a month for 6 months in our living room. And then after that, we were getting a little bit big. We were having 10 to 12 folks that were coming, and getting a little bit big for our little city home living room. And so we decided to move out from there. And we, through God's provision, found a coffee shop in St. Pete that was closed on Sunday. The owner was not a Christian, but I had gotten to know him. Mm-hmm. And he offered us the coffee shop for $50 a week. And that included a barista to be there to help us set up and tear down and clean up, and a pot of brewed coffee. And the barista was there, and if anybody wanted to buy a fancier drink, they could buy it. But if they just wanted hot coffee, that was included in our cost. So $50 a week. I wish we could go back to that rent price. And so for about 18 months, we met most Sunday nights there at a coffee shop, and began to grow, see more people come in and being a part of what we were doing. And then in the fall of 2016, we started to look for a space that we might be able to move to on Sunday mornings. St. Pete's growing. It's growing fast. It's changing fast. And we were committed to downtown, so we didn't have a lot of options. Mm-hmm. There weren't many churches that were interested in sharing their space. There weren't a lot of venues that a normal church planter would start in, especially maybe out in the suburbs where there's a lot of schools. Just weren't that many schools in downtown St. Petersburg. And so we ended up finding a call center that used to be for telemarketers for AAA Auto Company.
Wow. And that was on, if I recall right, that was the 3rd floor.
It was on the 3rd floor of an office building in downtown. And when I first presented it to sort of the budding leadership of our church, the stakeholders early on, I was met with some askew glances and some "are you sure's?"
Yeah.
But the price was near our budget, and it would give us access to the space whenever we needed it. It had offices, a couple offices, and it had room that we could turn into children's space. And so we decided to pull the trigger, and end of the year, signed a lease and began some preview services, and then in January of 2017 had our first public worship service.
Now, talk to me about the growth. You're on the third floor.
Yep.
And you can't put up any permanent signage.
Yep.
And it's not in a really, it's not totally obscure, but it's not in a really high traffic area.
Right. There were a couple of landmarks. If you live in downtown St. Petersburg, most people are familiar with Green Bench Brewing Company. It's kind of a landmark where a lot of people go to hang out. And so we could tell people that we're right behind Green Bench's back door.
Okay. And people that don't know that you'd say you're not too far from Tropicana Field.
Not too far from Tropicana Field. In fact, our parking lot, we had to negotiate making sure our service was done early enough for them to fill it up when there were Sunday home games, because our parking lot was a parking lot for the Rays.
Okay.
And so we started to grow, and most of it was word of mouth and our folks engaging other folks, and beginning to build relationships with them. And that has always been the sort of main part of our growth, has been people connected to other people.
I thought it was quite a story how you overcame the obstacle, being on the third floor, not permanent signage.
Yep.
And yet, during that time, God blessed your church to grow.
It did.
And
He did.
Even kind of outgrew that place.
Yep.
And so now you're meeting in a theater.
Yes. So just under a year ago. So we made the move. Our lease was a 2-year lease on the call center. And when that was up, we moved into the theater at the AMC Sundial, which is... again, one of those places that if you live in St. Petersburg, you know the Sundial. And so it's very easy to direct people to our church. And so we moved into the movie theater there. Again, not a traditional space. In fact, one of my favorite stories to tell is when we were leaving the call center to go to the movie theater, I had a couple families pull me aside one Sunday after church and say, "We are 100% committed to City Church, but we want you to know we're a little concerned that we're going to be able to make a movie theater feel like a worship space."
Yeah.
And they told me this sitting at a call center that was our current worship space. I kind of looked around at our 8-foot drop ceilings.
Yeah.
And
this is not the most conducive place.
We're not exactly in a beautiful historic church building as it is.
That's right.
And so we made that move, and we've had a great relationship with the AMC movie theater. And in fact, we have now sublet some theaters for them. They were moving. The business model of theaters are going to smaller theaters, less screens, nicer experience, more of an experience. And so they shut down 8 theaters a few months ago. And we actually have taken up the lease to sublet all those theaters from them.
Wow. So God has provided for you.
Every step of the way.
I know that planting a church is more than numbers and nickels.
Sure.
But tell me how your attendance is these days. I mean, this is going from zero. Well, actually 2.
Yeah. And I had some kids, so that they count too. We count them. We've been right below 100 for the past few months since we've moved. And you say it's not all about nickels and noses and things like that. And I think that some of the most amazing things that we've seen, just to tell you some stories about what Jesus is doing. The first meeting I ever took in St. Petersburg was with a friend of mine who I had grown up with. I had gone to some of those punk clubs with as a teenager. And he lived in St. Petersburg and has lived in St. Petersburg his whole life. First time I met with him, he asked me why I moved back to St. Pete, and I told him to plant a church. And he said in a much more colorful way than this, I don't really mess with Jesus anymore. And I said, that's fine. We can still share a burger and hang out. We've got a lot of friendship in the past. Let's just have a burger. And about 2.5 years later, his wife, fiance, they have a child together, says, Jesus was a part of your life growing up. And he wasn't a part of my life. I've never really been to church. But I think that maybe this is something that our son should be at least given the chance to be exposed to. And he sort of shrugged and said, yeah. She said, even if you don't come with me, tell me what church I should take our son to begin to learn. And he said, well, if you're going to go anywhere, you should go to Woodall's church. That's what he called me growing up. And he said, and if you do, I'll go with you. And he's my friend. And since they've been coming, she has come to faith in Christ. We're doing premarital counseling with them right now. They're getting married in just a few months. And just seeing a woman who grew up in a theologically liberal denomination begin to come to our church, and then after she'd been coming for about a year, last Christmas said that something happened to her during Christmas, and she began to talk and tell our small group about what had happened, and everybody was kind of tilting their heads. What's she describing? And what she was describing is she didn't have the language from her tradition, but she was describing conversion.
Yes.
She came to know Jesus, reflecting on what had happened at church that Sunday, and just seeing Jesus change lives like that. Jesus changed the life of a guy that had been sort of at a church growing up, and then when he went to college, got away from the church, and he became an officer and went through some tough things being an officer, and didn't know if a church was going to be able to handle the sort of trauma that he had been through. And came to our church, and now he's a deacon candidate and is very involved. And so it's not nickels and noses. Right. It's these amazing stories of what Jesus is doing.
This is the Power Break Podcast with another story of perseverance to encourage you to keep pressing on in the race of life. If you'd like to know more about City Church of St. Petersburg, go to www.citychurchstpete.org. That's www.citychurchstpete.org. Or you can check out today's show notes for the link there. The Power Break Podcast is a twice-weekly show that provides a discussion with JT and myself on biblical principles to help you succeed in the race of life, and an interview show with stories of perseverance to help you keep pressing on. Please subscribe wherever you have downloaded the podcast, and please leave a rating and a review. Check out today's show notes, books, the Power Break blog, and more at my website, bobbrubaker.com, and listen next time for the Power Break Podcast.